Welcome to the Brew Crew Review Podcast, the show by fans for fans of your Milwaukee Brewers.
All right, Brewer fans, welcome back to the Brew Crew Review Podcast. My name's Craig, and joining me today is my co-host, Vince Travato. Vince, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine, Craig. Happy New Year. Are we, is Scott or Chad coming on here today?
Not sure about that. I know Scott's still probably intoxicated and wallowing in the Packers season-ending loss in heartbreaking fashion once again. So he may not be joining us for that reason, but
Got it.
Anyway, Chad, though, I'm not sure.
Well, you know what, Craig, for me, that means it's time to talk some baseball. So I'm pretty excited to be talking baseball with you here in a brand new year and in January itself. You know, as the winter is hopefully coming to an end and spring will be upon us, hopefully sooner rather than later. It's time to talk some baseball. Spring training starts in a few weeks.
Absolutely. All right. Well, it's been a pretty quiet off season so far for the Brewers and a lot of baseball for that matter. A lot of the top free agents still haven't signed. Not expecting or holding my breath for the Brewers to sign any of the real top guys. But with that being said, we've made very minimal moves. So we can talk about that a little bit later in the podcast. But we want to kind of do a little bit of a tribute podcast to baseball legend and Milwaukee icon, Hammer and Hank Aaron, who unfortunately passed away this past week at the age of 86. So that's what we're going to dedicate most of this podcast to. Also, Vince, we wanted to mention passing another.
Yeah, it was a tough
baseball
week for
Hall of Famer, Don Sutton. Also,
yeah, a tough week for baseball fans and Brewer fans in particular. And you know, obviously Hank had a bigger impact probably in Milwaukee, just given the number of seasons that he played and given his status in the game. But I do think it's worth mentioning that, you know, Hall of Famer and former Milwaukee Brewer pitcher Don Sutton did pass away as well. He was acquired by the Brewers at the trade deadline in 1982, pitched incredibly well down the stretch for Milwaukee, winning a clutch game in Baltimore to allow the Brewers to make the playoffs, and did pitch for the team 1983 and 1984 seasons as well. So we're saddened to hear the news of both, but before we get into Hank, I at least wanted to mention that Don Sutton had also passed away, and they passed away within a couple of days of each other. So quite a week.
And of course, the acquisition of Don Sutton was instrumental for the Brewers' run to their first and only World Series appearance back in 1982. So of course, he's near and dear to many Brewer fans' hearts because of that. So again, a sad week for Milwaukee baseball overall, and definitely the world overall. With the passing, of course, of Hank Aaron, who is really a cultural icon beyond even his baseball icon status.
Yep.
I guess
for so many reasons.
I guess, you know, none of us, you know, got to see him play in a Milwaukee Brewer uniform. However, I mean, he was really still instrumental in Milwaukee baseball after his career, and I kind of feel that even without the existence of Hank Aaron and his role in the Braves, which really made a young Bud Selig, a Milwaukee resident, a huge fan. I believe that was Bud Selig's favorite player. They're about the same age.
Yep, it was.
And I think that was really instrumental in Bud's love for baseball and him wanting to bring a team back to Milwaukee after the Milwaukee Braves left. And I kind of feel without that, his existence, that there may not even be baseball in Milwaukee. So I really feel that that's kind of owed to the legend of Hank Aaron in some ways.
Yeah, that's a great point about Selig, Craig. I didn't even think about that and his impact on one particular guy who was, you know, so persistent and really did do everything that he could do and ended up succeeding and bringing a team back to Milwaukee after the Braves had left. In 5 seasons later, there's big league baseball back in Milwaukee again, and kept the team in Milwaukee in the 90s when there was debate over the stadium. And, you know, you're right, I think, on that count with Bud. And I also think that with Hank Aaron's role on that team in 1957, bringing baseball bringing a baseball world championship to the city of Milwaukee. It was the first time that a team in Milwaukee had won a world championship in anything. Hank Aaron really created a whole slew of devoted fans, which, yes, they were probably embittered by the Braves leaving, of course, in 1964, but they also became baseball fans, and they would later hopefully become Brewer fans. And it really gave baseball kind of a what I'll call a birth in the city of Milwaukee to a degree, in the sense that, whenever you have a city that experiences a championship, you're going to create legions of fans who are going to be loyal to the game for generations. And I've heard it talked about by people like my dad's age and maybe a little older that got a chance to see Hank play when they were kids for the Milwaukee Braves, and they're still talking about it all these years later. I mean, this was 1957 was the Braves World Championship, and it's still being talked about all these years later. And Hank led the team along with Eddie Matthews and other great players, Warren Spahn, and a whole slew of great characters. But with Hank at the top of that list, led the team to a World Championship in '57 and another World Series in 1958 as well, and really cemented himself as the top player, I think, on that team, certainly offensively, and one of the best players in baseball history. And he did it all in Milwaukee when he started his career. He was a rookie with the Braves in 1954, played with the Braves that entire time, ended up until he was traded back to Milwaukee to play his last two seasons with the Brewers in 1975 and 1976. But, overall he played in Milwaukee from 54 to 65 with the Braves, and 75 and 76 with the Brewers. That's a lot of years in Milwaukee, where Milwaukee fans got to see one of the best players to ever wear a uniform.
Absolutely. And I know you mentioned earlier, yeah, he actually started off his entire baseball career. I mean, he was from the South, born in the South and raised there, but he did start off his entire baseball career. It wasn't up in a team in Eau Claire.
It was. Well, he did play. He played one season in the Negro Leagues. I believe it was for Indianapolis, and the Negro Leagues at that time were becoming a defunct league because there was more integration that was finally taking place after Jackie broke the color barrier in 1947. But Hank did play one season in the Negro Leagues, and then he went to Eau Claire, where he played ball. So he got to experience life up north and for the first time, and he happened to do that in Wisconsin as well. So he really does have a lot of Wisconsin connections. And, people were talking this week, and Mark Atanasio, I think, he put out a statement. Hank had made a point to come back to Milwaukee at least once a season, sometimes more. Was still involved with the Brewers, was still obviously at his number retired, but was still involved with the team. Its charities, had still come back for events. He had been at his own Wall of Honor dedication, his own statue dedication. And his son, Larry Aaron, is still a scout with the Milwaukee Brewers as well. So, I mean, the connections between Hank Aaron and Milwaukee are eternal. I mean, it is a long-standing love affair between, you could say, the entire state of Wisconsin and Hank Aaron.
Absolutely. And he broke into the big leagues in 1954 with the Milwaukee Braves at the ripe age of 20. And he actually, then retired as a Milwaukee Brewer, as you point out, in 1976 at the age of 42 as a Milwaukee Brewer. I mean, that's quite a long career.
Yeah.
23 seasons. The biggest thing with Hank was his just overall consistency. I mean, he was just a consistently great player. I mean, I'm pretty sure he hit between like 30 and 45 home runs almost every season of his career, and it was just that longevity.
Yep.
He won several MVPs, or actually it was his only MVP season, 1957, but finished in the top 5 MVP voting almost every year of his career.
Yeah. Yep, one MVP. And one of the stats to get to your point about consistency that really stands out to me as I look over his career line. He was an all-star in 21 of his 23 seasons. I mean, it's just incredible. Absolutely incredible. So, I mean, that just shows you how on top of the game he was for all of those years. And when you think about all the great players that played in the National League during the years that Hank Aaron was there, everyone ranging from Willie Mays to Roberto Clemente to, pick your great outfielder that played between 1954 and 1976. the fact that Hank Aaron was at the top of the list with these guys, I mean, what a treat for baseball fans and Milwaukee in particular to be able to watch him play all those years in his prime is just incredible.
Absolutely. I believe he still holds the record for most RBIs in a career and also the most total bases. And again, that just comes from that consistency of so many seasons. And you point out that 21 All-Star appearances. I mean, that's how many guys can even say they played 20 years of professional baseball, period? 20 years
I mean,
of major
geez,
leagues
crazy.
being All-Star. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
It is nuts. And Hank Aaron's 2,297 career RBIs. That is definitely an all-time record, and so is 6,856 total bases is what the interns are telling me here for Hank on his career. It is truly incredible, and to add in just to the glory of his numbers, he actually won 3 Gold Gloves as well. So just to add to all of his offensive attributes, the guy could play some defense as well.
Over 3,700 career hits too. So it's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
He's hands down top 10 baseball player of all time, and in my mind, is top 5 for sure. The interesting thing people don't know, or I shouldn't say people don't know about Hank, but obviously he did eclipse Babe Ruth's home run record back in 1970. Was it the 74 season, 73, 74 season, I believe.
I think it was 74. Yeah, I think it was the first week of the 74 season.
74 season, yeah, that's right. And before Hank, obviously Babe Ruth was kind of a larger than life legend in baseball, and I mean he remains to be this day or whatever. But that record he held, I mean he was like kind of a man among boys during his era, so to speak. And he had that legendary status and that home run, all-time home run mark for a better part of the entire century until Hank threatened to break it. And one of the things that maybe not everyone nowadays realizes, but this was almost 50 years ago when he was chasing and broke that record, ended his career at 755 home runs. Of course, that's been since eclipsed by Barry Bonds, but he did hold that record, I believe, for 34 years. But a lot of people don't realize that there was actually quite a lot of people in the United States of America that did not want him to break that record, that cherished record and he got a lot of hate mail and a lot of death threats in the time that he was chasing that in the 1973 and, like you said, the first week of 74 season, and he kind of had to endure all that. And one thing I actually read about is he got so few letters of congratulation or of encouragement that he actually personally responded to every single one of the positive letters that he received.
Wow, I didn't realize you responded to all those letters, personally, but you're spot on with talking about the amount of pressure that he faced. Just consider the pressure that you would face just as a baseball player, as an athlete, and then you couple that with the other types of pressures that he faced, both societally and racist elements, and you had to me he's such a class act. I mean, when he was talking about that situation, he had a great quote that I've always remembered. And I say this as a guy who loves Babe Ruth. I've always loved Babe Ruth, and I think that he is the guy that should be remembered as his own version of a cultural icon. But Hank had a great quote about it. He said, I don't want anybody to forget about Babe Ruth. I just want them to remember me. And I love that quote. It was used. His race against the Babe was used as a lever by, you could say, racist elements, racist people to try to, keep the record in the hands of someone who was, white, I guess, to put it bluntly. But, Hank handled this with such grace and with such respect for the game, and in a way that wasn't confrontational in a bad way, but was confrontational in a good way, meaning on the field, he was dedicated to perfecting his craft. He did it over such a long period of time, like we talked about. He just silently went about his business in so many ways, and he was able to do great things. And he did it both within the game and what we'll say is without the game, like more broadly than just baseball too. I mean, he was a guy who changed the country for the better in many ways. And a few years, I heard an interview with Al Downing, former pitcher for the Dodgers at the time when he gave up the home run. later pitched for the Brewers as well. But Downing gave up the, number 715 to Hank Aaron and was the pitcher on the mound. And they asked Downing about, his experiences with Hank and kind of what he was feeling with it at that time. But the thing that stuck out to me was that he pointed out was that during the game when Hank broke Babe Ruth's record, it was 74.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about only a couple of years after segregation ended in the South. And he was struck by how Hank Aaron was able to rise above all of the negativity that surrounded, the pursuit of Babe Ruth, and to break that record, and got a standing ovation in the heart of the Deep South at a time when that was not common. And really what Hank's feat did was to, I think, make people more aware of the fact that, this was a man that was at the top of his game, that deserves respect. And it was a real milestone, I think, for race relations in the South in many ways. And I don't mean to overstate it, but I don't think it should be understated either. I think that what he did was truly something that may have changed people's minds about, something as important as race relations at a time when the country wasn't used to that yet.
Absolutely. And it's almost sad that this is 50 years. We're nearing out the 50-year anniversary of that, of course, that 1974 season, 47 years beyond that. And it still seems that there's just like this still hateful resentment in the country, as we've seen, obviously, in parts of the last year. But one thing I did want to point out, and I know, Vince, you lived in BC for quite a while yourself, but I haven't actually visited. I just wanted to point this out as one of my favorite Hank Aaron memories, because obviously I didn't get to see him play either. But when I was in Washington, D.C., they, of course, have the Smithsonian museums there, and walking throughout them, one of them had a Hank Aaron exhibit, a baseball exhibit, but highlighted case about Hank Aaron.
Yeah.
And then it highlighted two letters explaining the story of when, Hank Aaron did break Babe Ruth's record. And one of the records was an example of, I'm sure, just a number of just an unbelievable amount of hateful letters sent to him saying, using the N-word a lot and saying you better not break this record, and all this stuff. And so I wrote the entire letter someone wrote to him that was just completely hate-filled, and it was just disgusting, especially targeted at a man that just does not deserve it in any way, shape, or form. Obviously someone who never met him, never knew him, just saw him as a threat to, this iconic figure, or his iconic record. And it was really sad. But next to that letter, it was juxtaposed with another letter that I believe was sent from a Wisconsin fan of the Milwaukee Braves. And it was sent to Hank Aaron that same year during his chase. And after reading this letter, I literally, honest to God, it brought me to tears after reading it, especially right after reading the hateful letter. And this was a letter of encouragement that was written to Hank Aaron, saying how much he loves baseball because of Hank Aaron, how he's been his favorite player his entire career, and how much he's pulling for him, and how bad he feels he has to go through what he's going through. And that he said that he had just had the author of this letter, a baseball fan, had said he had just had his first son, and he had named him Aaron in honor of Hank. And it was a pretty incredible and powerful letter, and it just shows you that in spite of all these people that are filled with hate for whatever reason, that there are so many good people that are filled with the opposite of that, and really cherish people.
Yeah.
I don't know,
for who they are,
powerful.
For who they are as people.
I saw this at the Smithsonian like 10 years ago or so or more, but it may still be there. I'm not sure. But I'm sure there's also awesome exhibits, of course, for Hank Aaron at the Hall of Fame if you ever get a chance to visit there. But just really powerful stuff, and it really shed some light into what Hank had gone through. And of course, for those listeners of ours that haven't heard the story, but you've probably all seen the iconic shot video on the television broadcast that night of when he did hit that home run off Al Downing to give him 715, break Babe Ruth's 714 record, and there was a couple of vans that ran out on the field And again, I think there was a quote from Hank saying that he was actually kind of scared for his safety, and there was increasing security.
Yeah.
So I don't know how they got on the field, but they were just patting him on the back and whatnot as he rounded third base. Luckily, that wasn't a threat of any kind. But after he crossed home plate, his mother gave him a bear hug, met him at home plate and gave him a huge bear hug. And she actually had to tell the media that the reason she gave him that bear hug was to protect him from snipers, which is just
It's unbelievable. You know, Hank
crazy.
himself had a great quote about that moment, Craig. He, I remember it very, very directly. He said, I never knew that my mother could hug so tight. That was his quote about that moment. And I just, you know, think back to what the country was like, what he did just on the field. There's just so many reasons to love a guy like Hank Aaron, what he was able to do. And you know what, there's a reason why I think I saw a statement from just about every president or ex-president in the last couple of days about Hank, ranging from President Carter to current President Biden to President George W. Bush. They all had statements, and Bill Clinton. They all had statements about Hank Aaron. It just tells you the impact that this guy had when you had like 4 or 5 former presidents or the current president making statements about him, and what a great man that he was, what a model citizen that he was, and what he did in a positive sense to change the country. And on a personal note, I did get the opportunity to meet him one time, and it was very quick, and it was just because I was getting autographs outside Milwaukee County Stadium, and I was actually with our friend and former co-host Junebug, Nick Zeno, and we were kids. We were, I think, in middle school at the time, and it was an October day, and the Brewers weren't playing, but in fact, it was the groundbreaking ceremony for Miller Park, and they brought in some Brewers legends, and Hank Aaron actually showed up for the ceremony to do one of the first shovelfuls of dirt, along with Bud Selig and Robin Yount and a few others. And I just happened to be lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time. And I actually got Hank to sign a baseball for me that day, that I, of course, still have. And he was there. He was walking with his wife, and he was walking back to the players' parking lot at the old county stadium, and we got a chance. So I didn't meet him in the sense that, like, I talked to him for minutes or hours, but it was a quick interaction. But I at least got a chance to get him to sign a baseball in person and cherish that memory, of course. And it was it was one of my childhood highlights, quite frankly. Hank Aaron was very well loved and respected in our family. My dad being old enough to have seen the Milwaukee Braves play, as I mentioned before, and the stories were so constant in our house about Hank Aaron and Eddie Matthews and Warren Spahn. My brother, actually, he wore number 44 when he played baseball, even through high school, in honor of Hank Aaron. He named his bat Hammerin' Hank, so after Hank as well. So I mean, his influence was certainly felt in our family, but even more broadly speaking, for the community and for the country. I think you just see it manifesting itself a lot this week, and saw the pictures of the statue at Miller Park of Hank Aaron, and the flowers, the pins, the things that were put there. It was like a shrine, and in many ways it is.
Yeah, that's an awesome story, Vince. And no, it really just shows that a bright light went out in the world this week when we lost Hank Aaron. So it is sad, and again, he'll be remembered forever in Milwaukee for his awesome baseball career, and like you said, everything that he did off the field as well, and just the type of human being that he was. So
Yep, and to get a little bit more into the on-field stuff, we talked about some of his career numbers. To talk about the Brewers more specifically, he obviously only spent 2 years back in Milwaukee at the end of his career with the Brewers, so his numbers were down compared to what Hank Aaron was used to putting up. He was near retirement, but he still did make an All-Star game as a Brewer, and I think this is the only time that it's happened in Brewers history. And I don't know of another example in Major League Baseball history, but the last day of the season in 1976 was Hank Aaron's final game, and his number was retired after the game.
Wow.
Like he was still an active player up until the moment that his number was retired. So I don't know of another baseball player where that's happened, where he literally, plays in the game and then his number is retired. I just don't know. Maybe there is, but
I've not heard that. Wow.
Yeah, but his number was retired after the final game of the '76 season, and just because I like arcane bits of Brewers trivia, his number was the first number officially retired by the Brewers as well. So Obviously, there's been others that have joined him since then, but Hank was the first Brewers retired number.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, such a loss for the world and the Milwaukee baseball. But yeah, speaking of, I guess, kind of wrapping up that tribute to Hank Aaron, I know Scott wanted to be on really to give his version of his. He loved Hank Aaron like not like no one else. And so, yeah, hopefully maybe he can chime in next time he's able to join the podcast. But we did talk a little bit about the current state of the Milwaukee Brewers, and I don't know, like definitely looking forward to the 2021 season. I mean, it was great for the baseball season of 2020 to somehow happen in spite of the pandemic that was going on. But wow, it was a difficult couple of months waiting with no baseball last spring and into the summer before they finally kicked it off. But this season, it's really exciting to not know that we're not going to most likely have to wait that long. And that, as it stands right now, the season is set to start, in normal time, and hopefully get the whole 162 game schedule in. With that said, the Brewers' financials, I'm sure, took a huge hit in 2020, as did everyone's in baseball and throughout the world, really. But I think it's having an effect on what the Brewers had planned on possibly doing this offseason. Kind of wanted to, one thing that has happened since our last podcast, we did offer a major league contract to a utility middle infielder, and I'm forgetting his name.
Never heard of half of these guys. Was it Nate Robertson?
Yeah, that's right,
David Robertson.
David
Robertson, okay.
Of the, he's still, in his baseball prime in his late 20s, and coming from the Devil Rays, he never really got a chance to play every day there, and he can play every infield position, including corner outfield position.
Yeah.
So I think he's going to be just that utility type guy. But I mean, I don't know what our plan is for third base.
No one does. Craig, I know we're supposed to know these things because we're hosting a Brewers podcast, but like I said, I forgot his first name, to be totally honest. I do know that he fits into the mold of Stearns types, in the sense that he can play multiple positions, and seemingly did not have a great year last year, much like what we tried to do last season. So I don't know that we've done much to upgrade ourselves at this point. I mean, you could argue that our, top free agent Jed Jorko is still out there on sign, and we haven't re-signed him. So it seems like we've almost become worse so far in the offseason. I hope I'm wrong, but did our anonymous source Tom Carter mention anything to you about kind of Stearns just being patient, letting the market play out, and trying to get guys on perhaps a better deal financially? As you mentioned, a lot of teams right now are not spending money on free agents. It seems like there's been a handful of very active teams and a bunch of teams that haven't done anything, outside of maybe the Padres and the Mets and the White Sox and the Rays. Like, I don't know who's doing much this offseason. So maybe Stearns is playing a waiting game, or Matt Arnold's playing a waiting game right now as players come to terms with the fact that they may be getting a little less due to COVID. Did our anonymous source Tom Carter mention anything to you?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much spot on. And TC, again, he likes to be called, he prefers not to mention his first or last name. So try to keep that in mind for future stuff, Vince.
Okay.
Yeah, TC pretty much said that this year may be a little bit like, was it the 2018 off season when we kind of toward the end of the off season kind of got a bargain by being able to sign Yasmani Grandal to a 1-year deal, and he said don't be surprised if they make one-year signing like that if again it comes down to getting closer to spring training, and some guys are unsigned. So again, I think he's kind of laying in the weeds. But with that being said, I'm not expecting, looking at who's out there in our positions of need as free agents, I don't think there's any big name at third base that's going to be able to sign a 1-year deal. The one name that I know we talked about a little bit that most likely will sign with someone as a third baseman, even though he's been a shortstop for much of his career, and that's Marcus Semien.
Still out there.
And he could play third base, but I really feel that he probably will end up with a different team. I hate to be the Debbie Downer, but that's just my gut feeling. is that he'll
Hey, so,
a multi-year contract.
yeah, no, I tend to agree. So I know that when the offseason first started, we had talked on our podcast about the possibility of the Brewers trading Josh Hader. I've heard next to nothing about that so far this offseason. Do you think that there's still a possibility that the Brewers trade Hader the next few weeks? I mean, as we tape this, it's January 24th, and spring training starts in a few weeks. I mean, we're really
Like
coming up on
three
it.
plus weeks, and it's pitchers and catchers, which really gets me excited. But
Yeah,
it's kind of concerning. I really don't think, even though it was our initial thought, I think Josh Hader, it made sense to trade him this offseason. I think that he's now more of a trade deadline candidate, because that way
yeah,
teams can ascertain where they stand this year and whether or not they want to go for a World Series run. And usually requiring a reliever of his magnitude really can push a contending team over the top. So I think he makes a lot of sense, and you probably get a better package for him, at a trade deadline. And now there's obviously some risk involved with that. You never know with injury histories, or even just attrition with
right.
receivers sometimes. What if we're gonna get full value for them? But I think that's probably the plan. And then the thing about that trade deadline trading plan is more if the Brewers are actually contending, which they have, they have made the playoffs
Yeah,
in the 3 seasons. They're certainly
right.
possible that they would be in the mix again this year, with the expanded playoffs especially, and therefore keep Hader one more season. He is under our team control for 3 more seasons, but I think it's
Right.
a foregone conclusion that if not, sometime within the next calendar year-ish, like most likely we'll trade Hader as a small market team, but you just never know. So, but I just don't think it's been, like you said, in the next couple of weeks. So I do believe Josh Hader is going to pitch his last game as a Milwaukee Brewer. So that's something to hang our hat on and be excited about. One thing.
Yeah, and and if we do hang on to him, Craig, the back end of that bullpen between him and Devin Williams does look really good. It's just, and I actually think our starting rotation looks decent as well. I think it's just, again, it's a matter of our offense, not really being able to be relied upon. I mean, we saw some weird numbers last year from guys who were playing in a 60-game season, and I don't know how much of that is real and how much of that is just fluky because of the strangeness of 2020. But will Castanheira step up and improve his numbers? Will Christian Yelich get back to being Christian Yelich? If so, that's great. Then we should be right about where we were, last year, given the fact that we did lose a couple guys too. But I really am worried that our offense is going to be, putrid if we don't do something here in the next few weeks.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that we re-signed Dan Vogelback at a time when we thought that he would there would still be a DH this year, which now I'm pretty positive that there won't be in the NL. And so I think that if we even consider playing him at first base, which I think is a defensive mistake, but obviously if he's on a roster, that's the only place he can play. They'd at least look for a platoon partner with him. He's a lefty bat. We'd have to look for someone right-handed that play first base, I think, to have on the roster. Third base is another huge hole. Again, we did re-sign Orlando Arcia for our shortstop position, and of course the acquisition we made last offseason by trading away Trent Grisham for Luis Urias, and the thought was he'd be our future shortstop. But since Orlando Arcia is still on the roster, I believe that Stearns has stated this offseason that it's possible the Brewers could go on to 2021 with Luis as our starting third baseman. So I wouldn't be surprised.
Right.
He doesn't have a ton of power. I think that at his peak, he probably only have like 10 home run, 10 steal type potential, and that's not necessarily, above average for a third baseman. But I do think
No, it's not
in the lineup though.
No, it's good. He's got he still is young. He could still develop. He's got an exciting bat, but yeah, power is not really his game. So for me, our offense next year really depends a lot on Dan Vogelbach, if that's who we're going to truly go with at first base. I mean, maybe the Brewers see him returning back to form. He was an all-star in just 2019. It wasn't that long ago, but he's had a really bad second half after that. He had a really bad first half last year, and then he had a really good second half again with us. So it's tough to rely on a guy like that, but maybe that's the plan.
Yeah, it's really frustrating because I don't feel like Dan Vogelbach should be in the middle of the major league lineup at this stage of his career. Maybe toward the bottom if he's a starter at all. So It worries me a little bit if that's our plan, but we shall see. I mean, he did perform somewhat admirably for us going on the stretch last year, but I just don't trust. He hasn't established himself as that type of hitter yet, and I don't know if he ever will. I guess one thing for Brewer fans to keep in mind and keep positive about is I think just the return of Lorenzo Cain at the top of our lineup, I think will really, and in the locker room and everything, will kind of give us a huge boost to the offense, which we were sorely lacking after Lorenzo Cain opted out for the season last year. So having him back, I think will help the top of the lineup. It'll definitely help Christian Yelich hitting behind him and everyone else. I do believe Castanheira is very close to having a breakout season, whether it be this year or next. I think he's going to be, improving as a young player, a young hitter. And so, yeah, so I really just think if we one really nice, solid free agent signing as a hitter, as a starter would be great. And obviously I foresee it at first or third base. We seem pretty set in the outfield with Cain, Yelich, and obviously Garcia. And, at this point, I know we talked about this last podcast, but it's hard for me with that DH being gone. It may have been the death nail, so to speak, for Brian Braun never playing another game as a Milwaukee Brewer, which is somewhat sad, I guess.
It is sad. I mean, I still love Ryan Braun. I know that, he draws a mixed emotional response from Brewer fans, but, I certainly value the fact that he's been a part of so many winning Brewers teams and part of the team's culture and kind of provides that veteran leadership and to a degree. And could he still come back and be a bench bat, or could he be a guy that, was able to play a little bit in the outfield and a little bit at first base, like we talked about in past seasons? I don't know, but you're right. I mean, taking the DH away from the Brewers as an option for 2021 is certainly not indicative of a likelihood that he comes back. And if we really saw our last game of Ryan Braun in a Brewers uniform, back in 2020, it's a really sad way for a guy like him to go out. I personally hope that that's not the way that he ends his Brewers career, but maybe that's what will happen. I know that David Stearns had mentioned publicly that he's going to take his time and let Ryan Braun kind of work through some things, but we're coming up on spring training pretty fast, and I think that there's going to have to be a decision made in the near future, and Ryan Braun is going to either have to resign or sign somewhere else or announce his retirement sometime in the next couple of weeks. I don't think he wants to push it too much longer.
No, and for selfish reasons, I really was hoping Ryan Braun would kind of finish his career as a Milwaukee Brewer and be kind of that being the only uniform he ever wore, rather than whether or not he retires now or if he maybe comes back for one season. I don't think he's got too much longer of a career. And so, I don't know. I guess signing him as a bench bat to possibly platoon at first with Vogelback or something that wouldn't be terrible, but I just don't know that he can play first base adequately or is even that interested in it. Right. So we'll see. I know he began his career as a Milwaukee Brewer as a third baseman, so it sucks that we couldn't put him back there because we would need his bat at third base. But
yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, so I know that was kind of a little dig on Brewer fans because they keep wanting to just make Brian Braun play whatever position that we have needed over the course of the last 5 or 6 years. But
I know he's already alternated between third base, left field, right field, and of course, first base or whatever. But I'm partially guilty of that as well. I think it's kind of a recognition of Braun just being a good athlete that can generally play multiple positions. He certainly was not cut out to be a third baseman at the big league level, given the amount of errors that he put up in essentially a little more than a half season. But I do think he can handle first base, but it remains to be seen if he's even interested. I mean, it's been such a weird year here.
Yeah, he seems like the kind of guy that would only come back if given a starting spot. I don't think he's all that interested in finishing his career as a bench or a platoon guy. So I don't know that anyone would really offer him that, though. Like, it's hard for me to look at rosters across the baseball. But you never know. Like, we'll see. He could also be someone who would want to sign with a team, like the Dodgers from the area that he's originally from, obviously, and that was a fan of as a kid or whatever. But and just the fact that they have a really good chance of going back to the World Series and kind of getting a ring that way.
Right.
I think that would be the only way he'd be willing to probably be like a benchish bat or whatever. And so I wouldn't be shocked if he's either going to come back as a Brewer, retire, or sign on with a team like the Dodgers, I feel. So we'll see. But
Yep.
no, and then as far as it's interesting just looking at the guys that we currently have on team, because I was like, what would happen if we didn't make any moves? And obviously we're going to make some, but I mean, looking at our starting offense, like you said, I just mentioned our outfield, but we'd have Urias at third, RC at short, Hira at second, and Vogelbach and possible platoon partner at first. That's not that great of offensive. And then catcher would be no more Omar Narvaez. It seems like we're going to give another shot in spite of his terrible 2020. I guess it's worth giving guys a mulligan on 2020 season. I mean, we're giving one to Yelich, obviously, but he needs to show here, or he's not long for the Brewers or for major league as a major leaguer. So I think.
Well, I think that the organization recognizes that too, though, Craig. I mean, look at the number of catchers that we still have within, AAA or at the major league level between Narvaez and Pena, but also Freitas and Nottingham is in the fold. And I remember that there was one other signing earlier in this offseason. I'm sorry, the name escapes me, but one of the backup catchers from Pittsburgh. So we, certainly David Stearns and Matt Arnold are looking at different options. And, I think Narvaez may get the first crack at it just because he was brought in a kind of a higher profile trade. And they may just be chalking 2020 up as an aberration for everybody who had a bad year. But I think he's on a short leash.
Yeah, absolutely. And then real quick, just you mentioned that the guys that we are keeping are, our bullpen seems pretty stacked already. Whether or not Freddie Peralta is part of that bullpen where he pitched much better at last in 2020 than he ever has as a, consistently in the rotation. He might be, people talk about his numbers overall being almost ace-like out of the bullpen. He may be staying there. I don't know. But looking at our rotation, obviously, we're losing. I mean, coming back kind of toward the top of the rotation would be Brandon Woodruff and Corbin Burns. Hopefully those young guys are healthy and ready to go. The rest of the rotation is kind of just filled with question marks. I mean, Josh Lindblom really didn't kind of underperform last year and even got, booted out of the rotation. Eric Lauer was someone that's part of that same Trent Grisham trade coming over for the Padres, and he really never got going last year. I believe Stearns really has some belief that he still has, a quality starting pitcher somewhere in there and that he's young enough to figure it out. So I really feel that he may be given a spot or at least a long opportunity at the beginning of the season to establish himself as a regular starter this year. So, and then beyond that, I don't know what we're doing with Freddie Peralta, whether or not we're leaving him in the bullpen or putting him in the rotation. And I'm trying to think if I'm missing anyone. But I think we definitely need to sign one or two veteran starting pitchers as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and we've kind of passed up the opportunity to sign some guys that I thought maybe the Brewers might have been interested in. I think Lance Lynn has already signed this offseason, and there have been a number of guys like that. So, I don't know if Stearns is looking or if he thinks he's going to be able to kind of go with what he's got, or if he thinks he needs to address other needs first. But, it's been like radio silence, it seems like, from the team this year. There's really no buzz or anything about anything. And I know that a lot of that is, due to the pandemic. So it's partially understandable. I think that it would be next weekend. That's usually the Brewers Fan Fest, for instance. And there's obviously that's not taking place. So, we're missing some of the normal kind of markers of the offseason that kind of make it a little more widely known what the team is trying to do or what the game plan might be. And there really just hasn't been much. I mean, the lack of Brewers news this offseason has been really astounding to me. But, like you mentioned earlier, it's kind of baseball wide at this point outside of a handful of teams. So, hopefully we see some action, in the next few weeks, and maybe next week when we tape our podcast, we'll have some actual news to report. But,
that would be good. And the one guy I was forgetting as far as a possible rotation option for us already internally was Adrian Hauser. Again, 2 years ago, he had a pretty good little breakout. But then last year, 2020, again, he's someone who needs a mulligan too because he really did not pitch well out of the rotation at all. And so who knows what we have in him either or what his role will be either. So there's a lot of question marks. And I think we really need to send at least one real solid starting pitcher. And there's some guys out there I'd be pretty interested in, even like some reclamation type veterans like Julio Teheran, or even maybe like a Taiwan Walker or something like that. But as far as like one of those higher name guys on multiple year deal, I don't know if that will happen.
Yeah, I don't think that's happening, but we'll see.
So we'll see. But
yeah,
I mean, we do have some really core guys still in the middle of our offense with Kane, Yelich, and Hira to build around, and Avisal Garcia I think can be a little bit better than he was last year also. So I don't know. Overall, I'm still really excited as a Brewer fan going into the season, but I'm excited.
Oh yeah,
one or two quality moves. One definitely on offense, and one big one on the starting rotation. I think we won't do too much more than that. So I don't think Brewer fans should be expecting the world necessarily. But like TC says, that possibly we're waiting in the weeds, and we could, if one of those guys aren't offered a contract on a 1-year deal, we could grab a quality bat to throw in there too. So hopefully that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think it's needed. We should see in the next few weeks. Like we've said, it's fast approaching. I mean, the season is really snuck up on me, and I'm very excited about it. And I don't know where you're at with things, and I know that you had COVID back in the day. I fortunately have not yet had it, but hopefully these vaccines get rolled out. Yeah, no, I'm not looking to do it, but hopefully these vaccines get rolled out pretty quick, and would love to do it in time for baseball season, and if fans are allowed, and would love to see a live baseball game in person. It's like I'm going through withdrawal or something. The last game that I went to was the Nationals Dodgers NLCS in 2019, and I'm craving some baseball. So yeah, very, very excited to get back to a live baseball game.
No, I've never been more proud of my son before, because he, my 6-year-old, didn't get to go to a game last year. Obviously, no one did. And he saw me watching a football game, and he looked at the field, and he's like, "Dad, when can you take me to a baseball game?"
Yes.
He didn't want to go to a football game, but he saw the sports field, and he was like, "Yeah, when are we going to baseball?" Crying out loud. So anyway, yeah.
Good job, JJ. That's awesome. We're ready up here. We're ready here as well. I don't know. We're trying to get on as many vaccine lists as possible. So as soon as we're eligible, we'll be doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully, and yeah, I would love to go to a game with you this year too, Vince. So hopefully we'll make our way back to Milwaukee as well.
Oh, absolutely. I couldn't wait to get back to Miller Park. Well, it's like I guess it'll be a new field when we get up there, American Family Field. So I'll have to stop referring to it as Miller Park, but that might take a little bit of time.
Nah, I'm not planning on doing
that. Well, either way, I cannot wait to walk in and look at that field again. So yes, hopefully soon, sooner rather than later here in 2021.
Absolutely. So I know all of our listeners will be excited to know that Scott Bartell is still alive, and he'll be joining us most likely for our next podcast, we hope. He's doing very well.
Yep.
So, in case anyone was concerned, he was out on the last couple of podcasts, but he's a very, very busy man. Very busy off season for Scott. But anyways,
yeah, absolutely.
I don't know, before we wrap up here, if you want to mention any of our little Twitter.
Always good to give a shout out here. If we could get you to follow us, we'd really appreciate it. Brew Crew Review 1 on Twitter, and send us any email questions at brewcrewreviewpodcasts with an s@gmail.com. I know that Scott is also checking our Facebook page daily as well.
Absolutely. All right. Well, stay classy, Wisconsin, and go Brewers.
All right, Craig. Have a good one. Happy New Year, everybody. Go Brewers. Do, 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 do.